free cash flow up $39 million to $54 million. If we go underneath that and look at some of the operating drivers of that financial performance, over the trailing 12-month, two-year period, our average paid subscribers to our direct-to-consumer network has grown 20% CAGR. Our top 7 television agreements, the licensing of Raw and SmackDown around the world, the top 7 agreements have grown at an 18% CAGR over the last 3 years, and we've continued to drive significant international growth, so 14% CAGR over the last 2 years. I mentioned our media ecosystem. I'll go into it in more detail, but just to give you a high-level snapshot, in last year we created about 1,500 hours of content that we placed in 3 platforms: pay television, the digital global ad-supported platforms, and then our direct-to-consumer network. In 2016, those 1,500 hours generated roughly 6 billion hours of consumption. So about 5 billion hours on traditional TV, 4 billion outside the U.S., about 840 million inside the U.S., about 550 million hours consumed on the digital platforms, primarily YouTube, and roughly 300 million hours on our direct-to-consumer. So interesting thing here is about 75-80% of the consumption is happening outside the U.S. when you measure in time. And the other interesting thing is that the yellow and blue parts of the pie chart, the digital products, if you will, are approaching now 1 billion hours of consumption. 5 or 6 years ago, that was 0. We are the largest social and digital sports property in the world, not as measured by us, measured by others. We're over 825 million social media accounts. We've done, over the last 12 months, about 1.2 billion engagements. That's shares, retweets, and so on. We are the #1 sports property in terms of video views in YouTube, in the history of YouTube, globally. 17 billion lifetime video views. The NBA has 4 billion at number 2. We are also the second largest property in the history of YouTube overall. So #1 in sports, #2 overall to T-Series, which is a Bollywood movie channel on YouTube. People ask a lot of the time, how do you get 75% of that 5 to 6 billion hours of consumption outside the United States? How does John Cena have almost 50 million Facebook followers, more than any U.S. athlete in the world, with 75% of those coming outside the United States? How does that happen? And I tell people, if you go back in time and remember English Lit, you probably read Joseph Campbell, and if you were a good student, you probably read his book. That's the hero's journey, the monomyth. And what he said was that, and he had studied storytelling archetypes around the world, and what he said, they all followed a similar pattern. All cultures, all geographies followed a similar pattern of a hero emerging, a hero finding difficulty, a mentor emerging, dark forces coming against the hero, and then the hero prevailing. And so when you think of Katniss Everdeen or Luke Skywalker being popular around the world, it's because they're going through the hero's journey. Now, Luke is doing it within the context of intergalactic warfare, Katniss within the context of a dystopian future. Our heroes, their context is the ring. The other thing that makes WWE content appreciated outside the U.S., where other sports might struggle, is the ring, the simplicity of the ring. So the storytelling is eternal and crosses cultures, and the ring is understood by all. You know, and wherever you go in the world, whether it's India, the Middle East, Latin America, people see a ring and people see 2 people entering the ring, they know what's going to happen in the ring. That's why WWE content travels around the world. And we've been doing it for a long time. It's always interests me, depending on how old the person is who I'm talking to, they always think that's when WWE was the most popular. So when I talk to someone my age, they think it was Hulk Hogan, who's not on the page. If I talk to somebody about 10 years younger than me, it's Stone Cold. When I talk to my friends' kids who are 12 or 13, it's John Cena or Charlotte, our women's champion. So it's one of the interesting things. The brand is so big, And there are so many people who've experienced it, it's funny to hear, oh yeah, you guys were big when? I said, look, when John Cena is the most followed athlete in the world today, North American athlete, we're big now. Second, on the transformation, to give people a perspective of where we are. So if you follow the company's history, there have been massive transformations along the way since Vince McMahon founded WWE. First, when he bought the company, it was a Northeast touring company. They made all its revenue from selling tickets. Over the next 5 to 10 years, he turned it into a U.S. touring business. Over the next 10 years, with the advent of multi-channel cable around the world, he turned it into a global media company. Back 12 through 2014, 11 through 2014, we were preparing for the next transformation. Back then, we thought the future for a company like ours, an IP video-centric company, was going to be about social, digital, and direct-to-consumer. And we began laying the foundation for that. Starting in 2015, we've begun to see the fruits of that labor. And just to give you a little bit of context of that transformation, if you go back to 2010, total revenues of about $480 million for the company, about 10% coming from a digital platform. Today, as I mentioned, all-time high revenues for the third year in a row, $784 million trailing 12 months, and over a third of that revenue now on digital platforms, so about a 30% CAGR. Similarly, and there's an overlap, it's not one-to-one, but an overlap between digital and direct-to-consumer. If you went back to 2010, about a quarter of our revenue came from a direct interaction with a consumer. Today, again, with our overall revenues growing significantly to $784 million, about half of our revenues are coming in some interaction that comes directly to consumer. We think this is a long-term trend and that we're well positioned to take advantage of. Third, I mentioned going into a little bit more detail on the media part of our business. I tell people, whether you're a current investor or you're thinking of investing, you should have a strong perspective on the media ecosystem. The ticketing business is important. In fact, all those events create a large portion of the media. The consumer product is important. It's a high-margin business. In fact, we're the #1 action figure in the U.S. this year, so an incredibly important part of the business. But as we look into the future, you really should have a perspective and conviction around our media strategy. I mentioned the 1,500 hours before across the 3 platforms. Talk about them a little bit more in detail. The most important content that we have, the most valuable content that we have, are Raw and SmackDown. Monday Night Raw is live for 3 hours in the United States and around the world, different times, on NBCU in the U.S., SmackDown live on Tuesdays. That's 5 hours of live content. And unlike the sports leagues, we do it 52 weeks a year. There is no off-season, so 260 hours of live content. Today, predominantly, that content sits in the pay TV ecosystem. NBCU in the U.S., OSN in the Mideast, Fox Latin America in Latin America, Sony in India, B-Sky B in the UK, ProSieben in Germany. Primarily on pay TV. The one place where it's not exclusively on pay TV is in China, where Raw and SmackDown is exclusively available live for the first time starting about a year ago on PPTV, one of the large digital players in China. We also do other content for pay television, things that we think benefit from a broader audience. Show like Total Divas or Total Bellas on E, 2 of their highest rated reality shows. 30 for 30s that we've done with ESPN, one on Ric Flair, one on the history of the XFL. Probably the thing that I'm most excited about in terms of those special projects we do, there's a documentary on Andre the Giant that we've done in collaboration with HBO and Bill Simmons. And from someone who's seen it, if you're a fan of WWE, I highly recommend you watch it or on demand when it airs on HBO. It's terrific. The second platform we talk about is the ad-supported digital and social platforms, YouTube, Facebook, our own and operated Snapchat, Instagram. For the last 7 years or so, we've created 42,000 clips for these platforms. Some of it highlights of the long form, a lot of original content as well. Special series that we create for these platforms. As an example, we have a gaming channel, Up, Up, Down, Down. So it has nothing to do with wrestling. It's gaming, has our talent, has over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. We create almost 200 hours of content just for that channel. As I mentioned before, in 2016, 550 million hours of time was spent around the world consuming that content, about 75-80% outside the U.S. And then finally, the third platform is our direct-to-consumer network. So a lot of content available, our most important content, 5 hours live every week on pay television, a lot of content available on the social and digital platforms. The direct-to-consumer network is a tiered product for our most ardent fans. It's not for all our fans. I always say I have friends of mine. Mom and dad tend to watch Raw with their son and daughter, watch it most Monday nights, sometimes on Tuesday. They're never going to get the network. I have other friends, dad, 2 sons, watch Monday Night Raw and SmackDown Live religiously. The dad has been a fan his whole life. They were early subscribers and still are. So we have a lot of different fans enjoying our core content. The network is for a small, go-deep portion of our fans, and it has 3 things on it. It has our playoffs, if you use the sports analogy. If Raw and SmackDown is the regular season, our playoffs are in the network, including our Super Bowl, WrestleMania. About once a month, we have a big event on the network. Second thing it has is new content we create. We've done reality series. We've done some animation, all using our IP. We do our version of 30 for 30s. That sits on the network. Kind of goes deep into WWE. And then finally, we have our long tail. So we now have over 10,000 hours of content available on WWE Network, including every Raw and SmackDown that's ever aired. We window it, right? So our partners get it live, and about 30 days or so later, it comes on the network. But now you can enjoy any Raw and SmackDown that's ever aired. Any pay-per-view, so our special events, our Super Bowls, our playoffs, you can enjoy it. Total Bellas and Total Divas, not the current season, but the older season, you can enjoy. So it is the place for everything WWE. $9.99 a month, available around the world. So that's the ecosystem. So we look forward, how do we think about growth for WWE? Well, generally, we think there are some key trends that, in our view, are tailwinds for us. There continues to be more and more value being placed on live viewership. It becomes the differentiator of networks versus the SVOD services. There is an acceleration of direct-to-consumer. More and more people every day become more and more comfortable interacting with brands direct-to-consumer, whether it's video, whether it's audio, whether it's consumer products. The next gen, I see it with my girls, 13 years old. I have an 18-year-old as well. Her too, although she watches a little bit less TV than the twins. But the twins, boy, they only go to the social and digital platforms. When they want to watch video, I haven't seen them turn on the cable box in a long time. They go to Netflix, they go to YouTube, they go to Hulu. We think the next generation will find WWE on these platforms. Every day, broadband gets stronger to allow the consumption of video, and it grows in penetration. The social platforms have become, so we probably need to update the slide. They're not becoming, they have become video destinations. And then because of our strength in some key emerging markets, India highest, it's our biggest market in terms of consumption. The growth of the middle class in that market, we think, has a long tailwind for us too, as long as we can keep doing what we do. I always say it's simple to explain what we do. We entertain people. It's hard as hell to actually execute it, but if we keep doing that, it augurs well for us. So there's some key trends that we think benefit us in the long term. Today I mentioned the media, 60%, and has been growing rapidly. As we look at the key growth drivers, we believe we can continue to increase the monetization of our content. We can close that gap between international video consumption, international revenue monetization. So 75% of our consumption, those 5 to 6 billion hours of time being spent, it's happening outside the U.S., but 25% of our revenues come from outside the U.S. So that mismatch, we think, over time, as economies grow, where we're popular, we should be able to monetize, again, if we keep doing what we've been doing. And then data. As we've become a direct-to-consumer business, again, almost half the revenue, the amount of data that we collect on from our audience is allowing us to do special things and personalizing the experiences with them. Again, I'll talk a little bit more about that and give some examples. First, on the network, there's about 300 million broadband homes in the world. About half of them have a member with at least some affinity to WWE. Over the last few years, we've been able to take that direct-to-consumer product from launch in February of 2014 to about 1.5 million subscribers today. And again, those are subscribers paying $10 a month on average around the world. About 25% of them come from outside the U.S. It's now our second largest business, our second most profitable business. I mentioned the licensing of Raw and SmackDown. If you look at our top 7 agreements, U.S., U.K., India, the Middle East, Canada, you see where the deals were in their prior cycle. We ended 2014 with those 7 deals generating revenue of approximately $130 million. During that last renewal cycle, you see the contractual outcomes. We had a step up as the new deals took effect in 2015 of about 30%, and then about 10% or so blended escalators over the ensuing years. As we've been public with, we have a significant number of renewals coming up again in our renewal cycle, primarily throughout 2019 into early 2020. And so while those deals expire during that time period, given the way the contracts are structured, we expect the announcements of our distribution strategy for Raw and SmackDown to follow this calendar. The U.S. deal ends in Q3 2019. We expect to announce our distribution plans in the U.S. sometime between May and September of this year. I tell people it could happen before, could happen after, but our best judgment, given the structure of our contract, is that it happens somewhere between May and September. The UK, which is our second largest deal, we expect to happen sometime in the second half of this year. And again, the new deal would actually take effect on Jan 1, 2020, but we would announce a distribution strategy in the second half. India, which is our third largest deal, also expires at the end of 19, so starts in Jan 1, 2020. We'd expect to announce somewhere in the first half of 19. The U.S. is by far our largest deal, and these 3 are by far the preponderance of the revenue we were just looking at. So big event. It's an interesting and special moment in time for WWE from a financial perspective. The other element, growth drivers, as we look forward, as I mentioned, we've tripled the revenue, more than tripled the revenue over the last 13 years, so about a 9% CAGR internationally. We think that mismatch in consumption and monetization, 75% of time spent is outside the U.S. with our video, and about 25% of the monetization. We're going to continue localizing content. We're going to let some of the macroeconomic trends be tailwinds for us. We think over time that gives us a 10-year runway. On the data side, so WWE today has about 10 million user accounts across its network product, our free WWE.com product where you can interact with free video. We have data on social. We have data on ticketing. We have data on product. What that means now is we have more than 400 data points about how people consume content on our network. Who are they searching for? Where do they pause? How many times do they repeat something? We really understand that. We have about 80-plus variables on payment behaviors. How do you pay? When do you pay? What do you use to pay? We have about 200 variables around how you interact with us on email and push notifications. Which ones do you open? Which ones do you not? We have about 1,200 variables across demographics, credit card information, credit score, lifestyle data, right? Because we have third-party data overlays that we can put on our data set. We have about 70 variables about how you consume the content in terms of the screen size, how your experience is, how much you're rebuffering. So we really understand the quality of service and how you're interacting with video. And then finally, I mentioned we have over 20 variables on what products are you buying on WWE Shop. What tickets are you buying? Where in the arena are you buying tickets? So that means we can see someone who buys a product, let's say a T-shirt with Finn Balor on it, but they're watching the AJ Styles WWE 24. So we can personalize how we communicate with you. We can tell you, look, we know you like Finn. Do you know that there's content for Finn on the network? We know you watched AJ's 24. We know then, well, did you know that we have a brand new T-shirt for AJ? So it sounds small. But when you can leverage at scale over 10 million accounts, and that number's 10 million, we're going to keep growing that. If we can do $1 better in lifetime value, 10 million. If we can do $10 better, that's 100 million. So when people say, why are you investing in data and tech? It's because half of our revenues now come from our direct interaction with the consumer. And we're getting smarter every day. A couple of years from now, I'll be able to personalize at scale on a one-to-one basis across all these elements. That's what we're building. So here's some examples. We have network consumption. The favorite star, AJ Styles, that's the promotion they get. We also know how many tickets you bought. We know how much session time you have. That young lady, I think that's the icon is a young lady, is going to get that email. You bought 4 tickets at $150. We see all the payments you've made to us. You get a special offer just for you because we know what your LTV is. You've purchased 38 items to date. We're going to give you special purchase on tickets. WWE Network, we see the consumption of in-ring even surprises us when we launched the network. So we've done the UK Championship live. First time ever we've done a tournament outside the U.S. with non-WWE talent, just for that local market. We did the Mae Young Classic, find the next WWE female superstar. We started a new live show, in-ring live show on the network called 205 Live for our cruiserweight. Things we would not have done without the use of data on the network. When we first started NXT and said we want to start touring NXT out of its home base in Florida, so what town should we start? What areas? Didn't know. It was a brand new brand. Well, guess what? We went on the net, we got the data, and we saw where NXT was strong in terms of viewership on WWE Network. That became the first touring plan for NXT. So little things that done at scale add up. I will say probably the most transformative element of how WWE operates day to day, kind of the grind that anybody in business has of day to day, is this. Throughout the organization, where you're marketing, whether you're creating content, you're marketing the content, data has kind of infiltrated itself in everything we do. We have a long way to go. I mean, when I'm talking events, I'll say, if you go to Facebook, 90%, they have about 5 or 10% of their employee population are data scientists, roughly. But the other 90 or 95 are data people, right? We're transforming that. We got 2 or 3% of our staff, 5% of our staff who are data scientists. Over time, that 95%, we want them to be data people. Because as we grow the digital part of the business and the direct-to-consumer, it will be, we believe, financially transformational as well. So it's a third one. So more content, monetize our premium content, that international monetization, and then the use of data. And then finally, talk about the financial outlook. Over the last 3 years, as I mentioned, record revenue, consistent growth in operating income, consistent growth in adjusted OIBDA. If you looked at the business model, as I mentioned, a solid base of predictable recurring revenue, our CPG business, our live event business. We believe a real growth opportunity in the media businesses for the reasons I talked about. High variable margins, so high fixed cost business with high variable margins. We're going to invest some of that variable margin accretion if revenue grows as we expect it to. And that's the kind of virtuous circle of our business model. And as I mentioned, the 3 areas for investment: content, global markets, and technology and data. In terms of short-term results, we started the year saying we thought we'd deliver record revenues, record adjusted OIBDA of $100 million, and record subscriber levels. On the recent call, we confirmed we expect record revenues at 784 trailing 12 months is a record. We raised the adjusted OIBDA guidance to 108 to 112 million from 100, and we'll deliver record sub levels. For 18, we're planning on another year of record revenues, another year of record adjusted OIBDA, and another year of record subscriber levels. So that's the presentation part of this, and then I'll turn it to Q&A.
Some questions about your relationship to the actual wrestlers. You talked about what contracts or relationships you have. And secondly, back in the days of Bruno Sammartino,
we had his picture up there.
I know that.
Yeah, okay.
25% real wrestling, 75% acting. Is it the same thing? And on that point, how does that compare with the extreme fighting? So is there a residual danger of injury, or is it less so with more business than it is with football or street fighting?
Yeah, so I'll take the first one. We're not specific about our talent agreements, but generally what we like to say is that it's a mutually beneficial association, so they're under agreements, but both parties could terminate them in pretty short order. So we're not trying to lock anyone up. It has to work for both parties, and that model has worked for a long time and led to a succession of iconic stars, starting with Bruno, ending with John. On your third one, I'm going to ask you again to repeat the second one, but on the third one, in terms of injury, I won't compare ourselves to any other sports other than to say we have been, we believe, and I think the facts back them up, very, very aggressive over the last 10 years on having a holistic wellness policy for all our talent. It's available on our website, so you can see the detail of it. And it's not just about injury or just about PEDs. It's holistic. It's about as healthy, keeping our talent as healthy as can be. So, but I don't want to compare it to anyone else. It's all real. We happen to know the outcome, but it's all real. Yeah, look, I think it's an interesting point. I mentioned it before. When you look at the tens of millions of people around the world who enjoy WWE, there's different types of fans. Some people can wax poetic on the technical abilities of different wrestlers. Right? That's one type of fan. There are others who are enjoying this grandeur of the spectacle, the music, the lights, the artistry. There's some others who enjoy the storyline. So there's, we're a mixture of sports, rock concert, soap opera, a little kabuki theater thrown in, reality series. So and different people enjoy different parts of it. And by the way, depending on who you ask, they probably want it to be more of the stuff they like. So that's always a balance we're having.
What do you optimize for subscribers, or ARPU, or cash flow? That's one question. And the second question is, as you create more content going forward, specifically, do you think that the biggest way to monetize it by selling direct to consumer, is part of that, or will it be
Yep, it's a great. Look, I think it's that second question is the core of what we spend a lot of time talking about and thinking about. So I'll get to that. And the first one, every piece of content that we create does one or multiple of basically four things. It engages fans, both new and current. It generates direct monetization, does indirect monetization by promoting other products, and it brings in a new fan base, right? So when we think of content, whether it's Total Divas or Raw or WrestleMania, they each do different things. Some of them do multiple. Raw and SmackDown today does a variety. It's why it's our most valuable. We monetize it significantly. It's our biggest business, monetizing Raw and SmackDown. It's a great promotional engine for the rest of our business. Because of the multi-generational viewing habit, it brings in new fans as well as engages current fans. It's 5 hours, so it does all that. So as we look at these renewals for Raw and SmackDown around the world, we're balancing all that. Having said all that, economics is significantly important. right? This is our most valuable content. We believe it's premium. We believe it makes networks, especially in the U.S., so economics is significantly important, but the others, you have to balance the other ones as well. As far as the second one, and it gets to that whole issue, if you imagine, myself and Michelle look at it pretty regularly. We have this huge spreadsheet where every row is a piece of content: Raw, SmackDown, WrestleMania, Showing Up, Down, WWE Warehouse, which sits on YouTube. And then the columns are these things like women, hardcore fans, casual fans, new fans that we don't have. And you can kind of Harvey ball those columns and rows and say, where are you doing well? Where do you have white spaces? So when we think about we're doing a documentary on Andre the Giant, where should that go? Right? We love that. Hey, our fans on the network, those are our hardest core fans. They would love that. And there's value to bringing it exclusively to them. We made the choice there of saying he's such an iconic figure and has such broad appeal that it's more valuable to us. It probably may not monetize to the same level, potentially, as we might get retention on the network, for example, but we think the reach element of that particular case for that particular piece of content made sense. When we thought about Total Bellas, so Total Divas is a success. We have female fans watching Total Divas that were not WWE fans necessarily. We have a spin-off, Total Bellas. What do we do with that? Should it go on the network? Same thinking. We said we think it's more valuable engaging with female fans to even a greater degree. Let's go broadly distributed on E! So I know it's a long-winded answer, but it's important, and that's how we think about it, is what to do kind of where, and through the prism of, are we trying to go deeper? Are we trying to go broader? Do we think this content needs to monetize at the highest rate possible, or are we using it to promote other content?
Just to go back to the slide that had the U.S., the U.K., and India.
Yep.
Okay, and I have a question about that, and I feel like the question I'm most interested in is our thesis that the internet aggregators are coming into the TV business in a big way starting in 2018, and that's Amazon, Google, Apple, and Facebook. And we've seen Amazon Prime do a deal for NFL Thursday night sports night. Is that something that, it's like, how do you guys think about selling your content to those platforms as they bring billions of dollars into the TV space? That's what I'm most interested in. On this graph, what I'm interested in learning is, it feels to me like these growth rates are quite different. So even though the U.S. and U.K. are biggest, what you said in your comments is India is your biggest use case, and therefore, even though it's third now, do you think that it could grow fast enough over a 5-year contract to actually displace or move up in this ranking because of the relative growth?
Yeah, and so by the way, these bars are time, so not dollars, but yeah, I'll get to that question. So on the first one, look, time will tell. As you know, Laura, for a long time it's been rumored or speculated that the digital platforms were going to get involved in a real way in live content. What we saw this year, I mean, there have been some toes in the water over the last couple of years, but what we saw this year, specifically with the Facebook bid in India for cricket rights, and with Amazon taking exclusive, not digital rights, but exclusive rights for ATP in the UK from the incumbent pay TV rights holder, it's no longer speculation. They're there, and they're doing it. How long they'll do it for, are they interested in WWE? I don't know. Right? Or if I do know, I'm not going to share. The question for us comes back, it really is a follow-on to the gentleman's question about how do you think of them. What we think about in that case is we have to, it's either a reach question, so Amazon does not today, we don't believe, have the reach in country, in a particular country, that traditional TV does, getting there potentially. In the case of Facebook, it would have to be engagement. You know, you'd have to believe that people are going to go to Facebook to watch long-form live content. So it's this whole reach and engagement. You don't, big checks are great, but you can't lose reach and engagement in your most valuable content. So it's balancing that. I'm not going to tell you what our decision would be, but that's how we think about it. So, but they're players. I mean, they're obviously have decided that it's important to them. They're very vocal about it. And then as a rights holder, as an IP owner, we have to think about not just the money, but are people ready to really consume that content on those platforms, long form? Maybe. And then what's the reach in some cases? Amazon being an SVOD service is a little bit different than Facebook being an AVOD service. So that's what we think about. In terms of these deals, look, I think you've got an ARPU element between the U.S., U.K., and India. U.S. and U.K. are similar. It's about $100 a month. India today is $3. That has, obviously, a follow-on impact to a rights holder and how you can monetize. Our hope is, similarly to China 15 or 20 years ago, that if India GDP keeps growing at 8 to 10% a year, you double, twice over the next 15 years, you're now talking an ARPU that can sustain pretty, significant rights. Will it be at the U.S. level? Maybe not on a per capita, but because of the population disparity, maybe in total you're looking at a media ecosystem that can support, rights levels that you were talking about. But we don't know if that holds up. We're not there today, right? At $3 ARPU, we're not there today. I got a spreadsheet for a lot of stuff.
You recently announced a deal with NextVR, so what was the particular
Yeah.
part of that, and where do you think you are?
Yeah, it's. I think it's early days on. Is that kind of a nice add-on, or is that a core way of consuming content? I think the VR and AR, our point of view tends to lean more towards AR in terms of being a way you would experience on a consistent basis content. If you've ever done VR, I'm sure everybody else in the room has. It's amazing. If you get a chance to see, I would download the NextVR WWE content. It is unbelievable. If you're a fan, it's unbelievable. You are there in the ring. So the technology is great. We think it's really cool. We've done it before. We did something with Samsung a couple of years ago. But yeah, it's an example of us experimenting. Whether it's a Facebook Live show, whether it's 360-degree video, whether it's VR, if you're in any of those platforms and any of that type of video consumption, digital and social, one of the first people, and it's very self-congratulatory, but one of the first people you call is WWE. Not because we're better than anybody, we just have a ton of consumption on these platforms. So people like to experiment with us, and we'd like it too. I'll quote the VP at NextVR, who wasn't necessarily a WWE fan. Once he saw our content in VR, he goes, "This is the best stuff we've ever done." It is so cool, and part of it is because we control all the cameras, we control we script it. It makes it even cooler. So yeah, like I said, if you get a chance, you hear me talk about it, but you should see it. Cool. All right. Oh yeah.
The share price, and I know you don't like to comment on the share price, but there was a 75% spike in the latter part of 13. Followed by a 70% drop in the second quarter of 14. Then we've got 50% surges over the last. Do you think people who didn't take the business seriously and it's taken a while to see this potential of becoming a digital company global?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think part of it is that, and I think part of it as well. When you look at the metrics, what's startling is you'd say, boy, given the scale of the brand, the monetization should follow. Because others have been able to do it. We haven't, and primarily, to be clear, it's Raw and SmackDown in the U.S. A lot of other elements, we punch at our weight. On that content, we haven't, and I think, I think people have been somewhat skeptical about our ability to do that. So we're working hard to address that, and we'll see kind of how it ends up. Thanks, appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Oh, nice to meet you. Oh, thank you. Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Okay, got it. Terrific. Thank you. Yeah, we're on AWS and have a variety of tools that we use. Yeah. Yep, we are a Tableau shop. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Hey, good to see you.
Kicking myself every time I see it, so I'm kicking myself again. Honestly, it was nothing. You were like the one person I wanted to invest in. It's just really uncomfortable with the family ownership.
I know, I get it.
But I don't know. The longer I wait, the stupider I feel. Especially because I cover, like we are our sole holder of Manchester United. If you